The Dallas Cowboys are entering one of the most pivotal stretches in recent franchise history, and everything happening right now feels like the calm before a storm that could completely reshape the roster. As the 2026 NFL Draft approaches, this team is standing at a crossroads where past decisions, current uncertainty, and future ambition are all colliding at once. And when you really start to peel back the layers of what's going on in Dallas, it becomes clear that this isn't just about adding talent. This is about correcting mistakes, redefining identity, and deciding who truly belongs moving forward. There's a growing sense that several players currently on the roster are dangerously close to losing their place on this team, and the draft could be the final trigger. One of the most glaring examples is Luke Schoonmaker, a second-round pick who never lived up to expectations. When Dallas selected him, the hope was that he would become a reliable, well-rounded tight end who could complement the offense. Instead, he's been overshadowed not only by Jake Ferguson, who has solidified himself as the clear TE1, but also by Brevin Spanford, an undrafted player who has simply outperformed him. That's the harsh reality in the NFL. Draft status buys you opportunity, but production determines your future. And right now, Schoonmaker is running out of both. What makes his situation even more precarious is the Cowboys' clear interest in this year's tight end class. Hosting prospects, evaluating talent, and doing extensive homework at the position signals one thing: they are not satisfied. If Dallas invests even a mid-round pick at tight end, Schoonmaker could very well be looking at the end of his tenure in Dallas. And when you consider his age and lack of development, it's hard to argue against that outcome. The same kind of pressure is building in the secondary, particularly around Marquise Bell. Bell has been one of those underdog stories that fans love, a player who exceeded expectations and carved out a role through sheer effort and performance. But the NFL is a ruthless business, and roster math doesn't care about narratives. With a wave of new additions in the secondary and a defensive coordinator in Christian Parker, who is clearly reshaping the identity of that unit, Bell may simply become expendable. Dallas is loading up at safety and defensive back with players like Jalen Thompson, P.J. Locke, and Kobe Durant entering the mix, while Malik Hooker remains in place. Add in the possibility of drafting a top-tier safety prospect, and suddenly Bell goes from valuable contributor to surplus depth. And when financial decisions come into play, that's usually where tough cuts are made. Bell's story might be admirable, but it may not be enough to keep him on the roster. All of this ties into a much bigger issue that has quietly plagued the Cowboys for years, and that's their inefficiency in the later rounds of the draft. When you look at the numbers, the contrast is stark. Dallas has actually been strong in the early rounds, consistently finding starters and building a solid foundation. But once the draft moves into day 3, things fall apart. The success rate drops significantly below league average, and compared to teams like the San Francisco 49ers and Philadelphia Eagles, the gap becomes almost embarrassing. This isn't just a statistical curiosity. It has real consequences. Late-round picks are supposed to provide depth, special teams value, and occasionally hidden gems who develop into starters. But if you consistently fail to extract value from those picks, you're essentially wasting opportunities to build a deeper, more resilient roster. And what makes it even more frustrating is that the Cowboys have actually had more success finding contributors among undrafted free agents than their own late-round selections. That raises serious questions about the scouting process, player evaluation, and overall draft strategy. Are they prioritizing the wrong traits? Are they misjudging development potential? Or are they simply not maximizing their resources? Whatever the answer is, it's clear that something isn't working, and it's something they can't afford to ignore any longer. And here's where things start to get really interesting. Because if the Cowboys recognize this inefficiency, the logical response would be to change how they approach the draft. Instead of stockpiling late-round picks and hoping for the best, they could start packaging those selections to move up, target higher-value prospects, or even trade for established veterans. That kind of strategic shift could fundamentally alter how this team builds its roster moving forward. Now imagine pairing that kind of aggressive approach with the possibility of a blockbuster move. There has already been speculation about Dallas making a run at Myles Garrett, a move that would instantly transform their defense. The idea of bringing a hometown superstar back to Texas, combined with the Cowboys' need for a dominant pass rusher, creates a scenario that feels almost too perfect to ignore. But it wouldn't come cheap. A deal involving Garrett would likely require significant draft capital and possibly a major offensive piece like George Pickens. And that's where things get complicated. Because while adding a player like Garrett could elevate the defense to an entirely new level, it would also create ripple effects throughout the roster. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the Cowboys' future and want more breakdowns like this, make sure to subscribe and stay locked in, because what happens next could define this franchise for years to come. The George Pickens situation itself adds another layer of uncertainty. Right now, there's no clear answer about whether he will even participate in voluntary workouts. That might not seem like a big deal on the surface, but in a locker room, trying to establish chemistry and identity under a relatively new coaching structure, it matters. Pickens is a key part of the offense, and any instability surrounding him creates unnecessary distractions. And let's not forget, he's playing under the franchise tag. That means his future in Dallas is far from guaranteed. If another team comes in with an offer, the Cowboys will have a decision to make. Do they commit long-term, or do they pivot and potentially reshape the receiving core? When you combine that uncertainty with trade rumors and draft strategy, Pickens becomes one of the most pivotal figures on the roster right now. Meanwhile, the Cowboys are also facing critical evaluation decisions when it comes to their recent draft picks. Players like Tyler Guyton, Donovan Ezeruaku, and Siobhan Revel Jr. represent both hope and risk. These are players who haven't fully proven themselves yet, but whose development will heavily influence the team's draft decisions. Take Guyton, for example. He has shown flashes, but injuries and inconsistency have raised concerns. If the coaching staff believes he can take the next step, they might pass on elite offensive tackle prospects in the draft. But if that trust isn't there, they could use a premium pick to secure a replacement. That's a massive decision with long-term implications for the offensive line and the protection of Dak Prescott. Speaking of Prescott, his situation remains one of the most fascinating storylines. Statistically, he continues to perform at a high level, breaking records and leading an offense that can compete with the best in the league. But the lack of postseason success continues to loom over his legacy. At this stage of his career, the expectations are crystal clear. It's not about numbers anymore. It's about winning when it matters most. Behind him, the backup quarterback situation is far from settled. Joe Milton has intriguing physical tools, but has struggled with consistency and accuracy. Sam Howell brings more experience, but comes with his own set of concerns, particularly when it comes to turnovers. This competition for QB2 might not grab headlines, but it could become crucial if Prescott misses time. And then there's the defense, which remains the biggest area of concern. The Cowboys know they need immediate impact players, especially in the secondary and at linebacker. The hesitation around drafting a player like Jermad McCoy highlights a broader philosophy. This team doesn't want to wait. They need contributors who can step in and make a difference right away. That urgency is also why names like Jordan Brooks are being discussed as potential trade targets. The Cowboys are clearly exploring every avenue to address their weaknesses, whether it's through the draft, trades, or free agency. And that kind of aggressive approach suggests they understand the window they're operating in. Looking at potential draft scenarios, it's clear that defense will be the priority early on. Adding players like a top cornerback and a dynamic safety could completely reshape the identity of the unit. But what happens on day 3 remains a major question mark. If history is any indication, those picks could either be wasted opportunities or a chance to finally break the cycle of inefficiency. The idea of going offense-heavy in the later rounds is intriguing, but it also raises concerns. With so many defensive needs, can the Cowboys really afford to shift focus like that? Or would that be another example of misallocated resources? At the end of the day, everything comes back to one central theme: trust. Trust in the scouting department. Trust in player development. Trust in the coaching staff. And most importantly, trust in the direction of the franchise. The Cowboys are not lacking talent. They are lacking clarity, consistency, and execution at the highest level. And the 2026 NFL Draft represents an opportunity to change that narrative. But it will require bold decisions, honest evaluations, and a willingness to move on from players who simply aren't getting the job done. As this all unfolds, one thing is certain. The Cowboys are about to define who they are, not just for this season, but for the foreseeable future. and every move they make from this point forward will be under the microscope. If you want to stay ahead of every Cowboys development, every roster shakeup, and every major decision as it happens, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because this offseason is just getting started, and the biggest moves may still be on the horizon.